Hello, 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 and welcome to the news in something. I'm not quite sure, but today we talk Australia because I would normally on a Sunday be recording with two Aussies, but one of them has decided that it was a good idea to play basketball and he vows never to play basketball again. So instead of doing that, today we are talking about the firing of a transphobe with somebody who was actually there at the reason they got fired. So without further ado, here is my wonderful Aussie guest. Say hello, Amy!
Hello, how's it going?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yes, I was there at the reason she got fired. Yeah, it's true.
So without further ado, it's like actual
This
news.
is the most
It's like,
unserious stream ever.
it's like actual news. It's like also when I jumped onto this, it said 16 concurrent viewers. Now it says 6. Where did the 10 of you go? Did you get fired by Moria Demming? Did Moria Demming fire you?
It's just all TAF sock puppets, but they don't know how to use computers.
So, on a more serious note, the reason we are here is because the Liberal Party of Victoria, earlier this month, decided that it would be a good idea to sack somebody. Not just anybody, but their former Parliamentary Whipe, of all people, Moria Demming. So, you were there. What on earth are we talking about?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting story, isn't it? And it's one that's bound up in a lot of international goings on in the kind of ridiculous culture war around trans people existing. The event in question that we're speaking about was the second or third last stop on Posey Parker / Kelly J. Keen's tour of Australia, a CPAC funded and dark money funded tour of Australia. And for those who don't know, Kelly J. Keen is a far-right provocateur, anti-trans activist, extreme far-right collaborator, and now Nazi collaborator. So I am from Brisbane, or Mianjin, as it's, and I attended her stop in Brisbane. Sorry, we're having mic issues. All right, I'm gonna stay more still. So I was at her stop in Brisbane when she came here. That was a pretty hectic day. It wasn't really an enjoyable experience. I was there because we were counter-protesting, and it was a very hot day. It was a very sunny day, and we were kind of behind a police line. This is in Brisbane, so this is a few days before the Melbourne event, but that was where it began for me. She'd already kind of showed up at one or two other locations around the country, but that day was pretty full on. We were behind a police line 100 meters away from where they were, the TERFs, coming to see her speak. People watching this are probably aware, Posey Parker goes around and runs these events called Let Women Speak rallies. And, where she kind of leaves an open mic and a bunch of, TERFs go up and speak on the microphone and talk about the need to eradicate trans people. So we outnumbered her in Brisbane, but regardless, I felt pretty hopeless after that day in Brisbane, just because I was so worn out, so tired after so many of these counter protests, so much of this, ridiculous spectacle going on. I just thought, when is this going to end? What is it going to take? This is just ridiculous that we have to do this. And I was heading down to Melbourne for work related to my role in the National Tertiary Education Union. So I was there at the same time as her Melbourne demonstration, her Melbourne Let Women Speak event as well. So I was there. I showed up to the counter protest, got to speak on the mic at the counter protest. And the Melbourne event was much more intense than what we had seen previously around the country. Obviously, Melbourne is a bigger city than a bunch of the previous venues, but Sydney was, I think, the day or two before. Sydney's pretty huge. They're pretty similar population-wise, I think. And Sydney was not, some big riot. So Melbourne was very different. So we were there in Melbourne. I had been, at the counter protest, which was a bit down the street in a park, and we moved on in. There were various counter protest groups, and this was happening. The Posey Parker event was happening at the State Parliament building in Victoria. In Australia, each state has its own state parliament building. So that's kind of the building where the most high-level political stuff in that state happens. we got a picture flying around. Okay, we're good. Is my mic going okay, by the way?
You were talking about what I'm about to throw up on the screen. This
okay, cool. But you can hear me okay? It's all going okay?
I can hear you fine.
All right, cool. Just want to make sure we're all good. As I'm telling this story. So yes, the Let Women Speak event, in other words, let cis, bigoted, conspiratorial women call for the eradication of trans people on a microphone event. And as we moved in, a bunch of the other counter-protest groups were there, because it was at that state parliament building, which you can see in that picture, in the picture there. It's on kind of a T intersection. So there's multiple streets facing in. So there were counter-protest groups coming from every direction. And the Posey Parker / Kelly J. Keane turf event was happening on the steps of Victorian Parliament. And as we walked up, I was kind of, towards the front, along the front line of our protest group, moving up, and we could see the police line. And as we got closer, I saw behind them something which is now, a famous image, an iconic, horrible image, which is that of these neo-Nazi guys, members of the National Socialist Network and other groups, wearing their tight little shorts and their cute little black Culture Kings t-shirts and their little cute bucket hats, doing the Nazi salute. And they had a massive big sign, nice little painted sign. It's good for the little gay boys to do some cute painting exercises together. But they had their hand-painted sign, and on it said "Destroy Pedo Freaks," which obviously is linking into broader, ridiculous, conspiratorial ideas about trans people having links to pedophilia, and that being some kind of congruent set of ideals or whatever. Obviously, it's total quackery, but that was the sign they had up. And that, set of beliefs is identical to what Kelly J. Keane / Posey Parker advocates for. She says the exact same stuff, just minus the salute, the Nazi salute. So to be completely clear, there's the State Parliament building, and then there's the Posey Parker event, and behind the police line with the turf protesters were the Nazis. The Nazis were there with them. They'd been let in. We discovered via group chat leaks from those National Socialist Network group chats and streams later on that people from the turf protest and the Nazis, they're completely interlinked. They pre-planned their collaboration. So they were there together. Nazis, literal, real life, swastika tattoo bearing Nazis alongside turfs together. So seeing this with my own eyes was completely shocking, right? Like just seeing a whole bunch of people acting as neo-Nazis in any public place would be pretty shocking. But the idea that on, the State Parliament building in Victoria, you have this happening and you see all the cops holding the line, allowing it, was, just abhorrent, completely abhorrent. I just could not believe what I was witnessing. My mouth was just agape seeing this.
So you were there,
Mm.
and you said you'd been at the one in Brisbane. You said you'd been at the one in Sydney, and you were then at the one on Spring Street. So just explain to people, just a little bit, how Spring Street itself actually works, and how MacArthur Street behind it, and what the actual layout is like, so people can actually get a feel of being there.
Well, you got that map there, so that would be useful. But yeah, it's like a T intersection. So there's a Parliament building, and there's a T intersection. So there's 3 streets facing into it. So there were counter protest groups facing in towards this horrendous thing happening from all 3 streets, and so I was in one of them. And also amongst those TERFs was Moria Demming, who is, or should I say, was a member of Victorian State Parliament, representing
Liberal Party.
Liberal Party.
But she's still in the state parliament. She refuses to resign. She doesn't see that she's done anything wrong. But here's the more amazing thing about Moria Demming here. Is not only was she just a member of state parliament, she had been given a position of authority within the Australian Liberal Party of Victoria in their parliament as their whip. She was the one that was responsible for discipline within the party.
Yeah.
This is the madness of this. So, good old John Pesutto here. Those of you who don't know, John Pesutto is the leader of the Liberal Party of the Victorian Legislative Council, and he appointed this woman to control discipline in his party.
Yeah.
Absolute madness. Absolute round the bend madness here. So, you as someone who was there at this protest, what did you expect to happen when you left this protest and you saw actual Nazis doing the actual Nazi salute on the actual steps of the actual Legislative Council of Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, I was in total shock. You know, my friends, some of them who are in the chat talking right now, we went to a bar after just because we were just, physically exhausted from standing there, noise making, chanting, trying to push up against the police line for hours. We went to a bar after and just were trying to make sense of what the hell had occurred. And look, disgust is the correct word to use, I think. But to be completely honest, there is one element of what happened that is useful if you're interested in getting cis people more on side with giving a damn about stopping this extremist anti-trans stuff. And that is pretty much any sane person sees a Nazi salute, sees people pretending, well, not pretending, but, acting as little gay neo-Nazis wearing little tight black pants on the streets. They view that as objectionable. Pretty much any reasonable person is going to view that as objectionable. And we, people who are engaged in the discourse around fighting for trans liberation have understood that these TERFs are so deeply interlinked with the far right, with crypto-fascists, with neo-Nazis. We've always known that. We see it happen. They do it in the open and act like, no one's going to notice. And for the most part, cis allies don't realize that stuff happens, or at least they don't act in a big way against it. But having that optically, having them together, and having thousands of cameras capturing it and it being on the news and all of this stuff, that was an undeniable display of the way that those ideologies, those conspiracies, intersect. And so in that way, it was very bad. It was very bad for them to be so clear about the way that this all works, having the Nazis with them, visibly.
So you attended, you were fairly exhausted. What did you think the next steps would be in terms of your politicians giving a damn?
Well, I have pretty low expectations of the two major parties and how they would respond to even something as abhorrent as that. And those low expectations were probably, well adjusted, because our Prime Minister gave such a nothing statement about it, just kind of mumbling, fumbling through, failing to properly or in any way really condemn the crux of what was going on there, which is anti-trans stuff. I don't think he's ever even been able to bring himself to say the word trans ever. However, in Victoria, it was, the politicians based in the state of Victoria were less able to ignore or bat away questions about it, especially because various prominent figures, including Moria Demming, were in attendance. So immediately there were calls for there to be consequences for open Nazi collaboration, and that extended to Moria Demming.
So did this surprise you? Were you actually surprised when you saw this actually happen? So a lot of machinations happened, a lot of things were said to be in the pipelines, but this is what actually happened to begin with. This here is what actually happened. Where did it go? There it is.
There's so much content.
Ah! It worked for a second. Come back, please. Please come back. Aha! So were you surprised when this actually happened?
Yeah, so when the leader of the Victorian Liberal Party came out and said, we're going to move a motion, an internal motion to expel Moria Demming, yeah, I did find that quite surprising. I don't think it's some incredible radical thing to do. I also don't think it absolves the Liberal Party of all of their horrendous treatment, policy making with regards to queer people. But the fact that they decided to do anything about it, yeah, that was kind of surprising to me. And I think that speaks to how damaging being associated with far right imagery like that can be. I mean, if you think about the idea that our society, our media is mediated on spectacle and on images, the image of the Nazi salute having anything to do with that, being anywhere near that as an elected official, that, you've got to see that as poisonous. So, yeah, I was like, wow, okay, that's happening. Bring it on.
But this isn't actually what John Pesutto wanted, though, was it? What did John Pesutto actually want? What was his first thing that he actually wanted to do?
Didn't he? He wanted to totally expel her, right?
He did. He wanted to chuck her out entirely.
Yeah.
But instead, they went for a bit of a fudge, and they suspended her for 9 months. And there he is, good old John Pesutto there, with a big old smile on his face, knowing he's just done what every good politician does: crumble in the face of something serious.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. In terms of the timeline of events, they went into that meeting, or at least he went into that meeting, John Pesutto, the leader, seeking to remove her, expel, suspend, get her
out of the party room.
Yeah, out of the
get
party
out
room.
Of the party room. Get out.
So removing her power, basically, and through the internal deliberations there, they decided not to do that, and instead just to suspend her for 9 months. Yeah, so
the ultimate in fudgery. So
totally. I mean, it speaks to the number of people inside that party room who probably think what Moria Demming did on that day in attending and aligning herself with those ideas is perfectly fine.
Do you think John Pesutto did it out of political expediency to only suspend her? Or do you think that he was going to get rolled if he tried to go for the expulsion?
I think it's hard to do much exciting politically within electoralism full stop, but also within the major parties. And so, yeah, when you're the leader, there is always the looming threat that you're going to get rolled if you don't capitulate to the wants of various factions within your party. And I mean, that's why we see our Prime Minister repeating TERF talking points. That's why we see him, John Pasuto, capitulating to the TERFs in his party. So, yeah, I think you're right in that he was... If he could have been more extreme with that, for sure. Yeah, it's not like he's some amazing trans ally. He in all of his discourse around this, as a conservative politician, did not at all speak to the need to be supportive of trans people. That was not the discussion. It was about the Nazi stuff.
And do you think this feeds into the wider discourse in Australian politics at the moment, that it's convenient not to do the right thing if doing the right thing means that you upset some noisy people next to you?
Yep, 100%. I think the terms of the last few prime ministers and their rise and falls demonstrate that perfectly.
I mean, just for some background here, John Howard was kicked out of office and was replaced by a man named Kevin Rudd, who was then overthrown by Julia Gillard, who then overthrew Julia Gillard, who was then chucked out by a man who, in the words of a former Prime Minister, if he becomes Prime Minister, God help us, in good old Anthony John Abbott. And then Anthony John Abbott got chucked out for a fairly centre-of-the-road, fairly dull, dreary man called Malcolm Turnbull. And then Malcolm got turfed out by a man named Scott. And that was all within,
if you're speaking...
It was all within 10 years, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean...
and now we've got a man named Anthony.
But the story of his leadership is certainly one of seeking to do anything that's not hardline conservative, and the hardline conservative faction in the party room coming for his neck because of it. So, yeah, that's a perfect example of what you're describing.
Malcolm Turnbull tried to say that Australia needed to have a conversation about the monarchy when the Queen died. Anthony John Abbott stood up and said that he was destroying the fabric of the Commonwealth. It's like, what are you talking about? All he said was we needed a conversation, and you got the former chair of Australians for a Constitutional Monarchy going, "Rawr!" Because that's what...
Oh, yeah. I mean, when he said that back then, that got me really excited about the prospect of the Queen dying, because I was like, yes, finally, we can get the ball rolling on the Republican, movement again, and really maybe have another referendum. But, yeah. Just
on a personal note, people dying, not the greatest of things, but, changing the head of state and stuff. I was a bit more excited about that. But, actual people dying.
I don't care about the Queen dying. I'm fine with saying that. I'm fine with saying I don't care about the Queen dying. That's whatever.
I have to say that because otherwise the algorithm doesn't like me if I don't go, look, people dying, not great. But, family tragedy, etc., etc. But, changing the head of state, I can understand that. I get excited behind that. But there you go. They may be synonymous things, but I have to be careful with how I don't get sued by Moria Demming for doing this stream. But...
I mean, the truth is she does not have better things to do than watch this stream. She would watch this entire stream.
She most certainly would. She'd see you tweeting about it. She'd see me tweeting about it. She'd go, oh, I need to watch this stream. So, Moira, if you're out there lurking, hello! Where she realises she's been called out now. But anyway, so Moria Demming is chucked out for 9 months. Then she goes and says this. Then she goes and says something which surprises absolutely nobody. No. I don't condemn these people. I've never condemned them. No.
Was shortly after. This was shortly after, or during all of these proceedings. It wasn't like
this was the day after she got chucked out. This was the day after she got chucked out.
So it was all pretty quick.
And it's like...
Yes, so she said she never condemned them. She said that it was just in a tweet, actually, which is so funny, these... it's pretty wild to me that, we have elected members of parliament who don't realise that things they say on Twitter are, that's real life. you will get in trouble for that. So yeah, she
yes.
just said that. She just said, yeah, I never
Here's what the tweet says. So it says, to be clear, John Prosciutto has stated unequivocally that Moira Demming agrees that Posey Parker and Angie Jones have consorted with Nazis and expressed bigoted views. I'm so sorry, Angie and Kelly, you must sue. Engage legal representation now. Moira Demming responds, I've never said those things anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. The level of absolute bug nuttery that comes with some of the people that the Liberal Party have put up as candidates.
Mm-hmm.
She got elected to the State House, but they tried to put somebody in the seat of Warringah.
Yes,
she was
Warringah. Yes.
Warringah, sorry. I've always pronounced it as Warringah.
It's so funny hearing you say all these names.
Because I'm English. It's Warringah.
Yeah. It's good.
And they tried to put this... How would you best describe the person trying to unseat Zali Steggall? I just like saying Zali Steggall because Zali Steggall is a lovely name. But how would you describe the person they tried to put in to defeat Zali Steggall?
Big loser. She's a big loser. She's a big loser who goes around and takes pictures of trans women in public, including me, and posts them on her Twitter.
I know.
Very weird behavior.
It's a little bit on the strange side. Didn't she also threaten that she was going to protect toilets by photographing everybody who went into them or something? That's not verified, so don't sue me, you strange person.
Yeah, can't confirm what's why. I'm not sure.
I can't confirm rumor.
But she does lots of wacky things.
But she really does. But that's the kind of person that Scott Morrison thought was a great person to represent the Australian Liberal Party in the Parliament of Australia. Yeah. And to my understanding, Moira Demming, she wanted that step up as well. So
yeah. I mean, look, and we've talked about this before. A lot of people watching may be aware of the fact that TERF stuff in Australia, like, it's a thing, but it really has not kicked off in the same way as it has in the UK. And legislatively, we're not really at this moment in time facing the same rollbacks of our really basic kind of rights as in the US. So whilst that discourse is present, and whilst the discourse from the UK and the US and other places, impacts what's going on here, we've been kind of lucky to not have a huge wave of bills and negative outcomes actually impacting us. Like, obviously the discourse has an impact, but so for Scott Morrison's pick federally and for Moira Demming, the puppeteering of them could be seen to be kind of trying to wedge the opposition on those issues and trying to kind of get that fire going, get that culture war fire going. But
Moira Demming doesn't do herself any favors here. She gets even worse with her tweets. Angie Jones responding goes, they know I don't have the financial means to clear money. Grift alert. I have to say that is grift 101. Come on, people. I need money, your hard-earned money, to stop the nasty people from taking me to court, and I can spend your hard-earned money, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yes, I mean, they all love to threaten to sue people. It's like their favorite little thing to do for all the TERFs on Twitter, to be like, oh, I'm going to sue you for defamation. Ha ha ha. It's like...
it's
yeah,
like,
so
Julie Bindel is, I will threaten to sue you 101. And Julie Bindel threatened to sue me once, and I said, I await your papers. And they've never turned up. They've not actually turned up. I said, I await the papers, Julie. I await the papers, and I'll see you at the High Court in London. But, they haven't actually turned up. But then it goes, this is how they get away with this ridiculous stitch-up. Does Angie Jones not ever look in the mirror and go, all my friends are saying this about the people that I'm saying are saying this about me? Does she not see that she's the baddie here? Does she not have that moment of, Mitchell Webb?
This is a tweet I made a while ago. You probably don't have it, but when I was there, rewinding back to being on this, at Victorian Parliament, on the Victorian State Parliament on the day, Angie Jones was one of the key on-the-ground coordinators for that event. And I saw her there meters away across the police line. She had a beautiful pink vest on, showing she was one of the kind of coordinator people. And she's just standing there, like, just eating a muesli bar, and there are Nazis in front of her doing the salute. And she's just like, they're just like, yeah, this is all happening. And I posted that picture of her standing there just as this is going on, and she's failing to condemn it. She's failing to do anything about it. And I'm just like, the tweet was just like, do you think this was Angie Jones' "Are we the baddies" moment? But I don't know if it was, because I think they are not that self-aware. Like, they can have Nazis with them and not. Yeah, don't get it.
All I hope is that the muesli bar company did condemn Angie Jones for buying their product. We are not associated with members of the general public who decide to consume our product. Angie Jones does not speak for muesli bar company. But yeah, then Moria Demming, she, goes full foot in mouth here. Don't worry, I never condemned you, Angie Jones. Warringah person, or, British turf.
Ari in the chat says #MuesliGate.
Oh dear. But then
she continued being. I mean, I think they just think consequences don't apply to them. Like, there's a way that a lot of these people who are drawn into this conspiracy movement act online as if they are completely free of experiencing any consequences for anything they do. And certainly Moira acts that way, and certainly a lot of the older turf people who are probably retirees, they act that way too. Maybe, because they are retired, they think, I don't have a job to lose, so I can just go around harassing people online, and who cares, but for Moira, as a public figure on her official, state affiliated account, she did face consequences.
She did. It was never a good. It was never a good look. But then, the truth really does hurt, Moira. The truth really does hurt, because eventually this happened. Because she decided that it would be a good idea to sue her boss. What a wonderful thing to do. She decided that it would be a good idea to sue John Prosciutto.
Mm-hmm.
And because John Prosciutto said that she had attended the rally.
Yep.
And John Prosciutto said that it was a Nazi association.
It was, yeah. I saw them there. I saw Moria Demming there. She walked out in front of the counter-protest group right next to the Nazis. And I'm not saying anything with this, but she was wearing the exact same clothes as the Nazis. Like, same hat, same shirt, same pants, same shoes.
Do you think they went to the same tailor?
What you will. But yeah, she walked out like right next to the Nazis up against the police line and walked across and did like a curtsy. There's a video of it that people there filmed. So
I'm sorry. Roll that one back. She did what?
She like walked out along, like, forward from the steps across kind of the intersection up to the line of counter protesters and walked along and was like waving, doing the royal wave, and did a curtsy with her little mini skirt. Or like an invisible curtsy. I think she had shorts on, but yeah. She had shorts on because she was wearing the same clothes as the Nazis, coincidentally.
Oh, how wonderful. Oh, how wonderful. She's a treat, she is. She's a real Easter treat, this human. But eventually, everything does come back to bite you in the backside in the end, even in Australia, where, things do move at, an upside down pace. And yes, that is a pommy joke against you Australians here. It did happen in the end. She was expelled from the Victorian Liberal Party room. Yes, but it wasn't John Prosciutto who chucked her out. It wasn't John Prosciutto and friends who chucked her out. It was her fellow party room members. They all voted to actually get rid of her.
I think, I mean, again, it's really important, I think, to make clear here that the Australian Liberal Party is not some big pro-trans party, and none of these actions seeking to remove her were motivated by seeking to get rid of transphobia in the party. They could not care less about that, clearly.
Well, a couple of them could, but most of them just couldn't give a toss.
I mean, if there are any of them that could, then they are pretty silent about it. But
a couple of them are coming out in favour of the voice, so, you know, maybe. But anyway, we're digressing onto another subject here.
To advocating for trans liberation, mostly. But
well, this is true.
I mean, yeah. So
this is the thing that amazed me the most, was that line there, that part there. She wasn't actually there when they chucked her out. She didn't actually turn up, even though it was a motion to get rid of her. She could have quite rightly said, "Look, I have the right to reply to this. I have the right to, you know, speak about this. I may not have the right to actually vote as I'm a currently suspended member, etc., etc."
Yeah.
But she didn't actually give herself that attempt to even go, "Look."
I think, you know, she was the whip, and so she'd be used to, you know, rolling out the whiteboard and having everyone's names in the party room up and running the numbers, running the phones, running the numbers, working it out. So I reckon she would have had a very clear idea that she was going to be kicked out in that meeting. And, you know, the thing is, for her and her turfy ways, getting kicked out is not the worst thing, because now she's practically an independent, still has her seat and her platform to say her ridiculous, bigoted things, and she's not gagged at all by the party mainframe. So she probably just came to terms with it and was like, all right, let's go let's lean into this. Let's kick off the anti-trans grift, you know, external from the Liberal Party. So
and it's become a proper grift. But the amazing thing is, though, most people in Parliament are just, you know, ignoring her. She really, she reminds me in Victorian politics of when Pauline Hanson got elected in 1996. And because Pauline Hanson was elected on the Liberal Party ticket, etc., was disendorsed by John Howard before the election, but she was actually elected, and everybody just shunned her. Everybody shunned her, and now I think everyone's just shunning Moria Demming.
Yeah, you know, I think in these kind of parliamentary systems, there's all the clubs, there's all the factions, and everyone knows who the wild extreme people are, and she's clearly one of those. So
she's clearly one of those absolute lunatic, round the bend, weirdo McNuggets that you find when you dig deep into any of the political parties. She's the McNugget that keeps on giving, that just, you know, keeps upsetting your stomach for days and days. I can see that in the.
Why are people in the chat talking about my hair? Guys, stay on topic. We're talking. This is a hardcore politics stream.
Look, my hair is nicer. Talk about my hair. Look, talk about my hair.
Yeah, okay. Give her some attention.
Look, my ego demands that my hair now get some attention. But so, do you think this is a watershed moment for mainstream trans rights in Australia?
I don't think her being removed from the party is. But I do think that we were going pretty good in terms of fending this extremist stuff off before this happened. And there was a concern that, you know, Kelly J. Keen's coming to Australia and she is going to get this going. Like it's going in the UK, like it's, you know, happening in the US in another way. And what happened in Naarm or Melbourne ensured that will not be the case. In fact, it has really made anything associated with this turfy stuff pretty toxic. That doesn't mean that mainstream political figures, including the Prime Minister of the country, does not capitulate to TERFs internally. It doesn't mean that he's afraid to use dog whistles that most people wouldn't detect. He does do that. He did that very recently in an interview with Piers Morgan. But in terms of the mainstreamification of
interview with Piers Morgan, that's a dog whistle in and of itself.
Sure. Yep, I completely agree. So
Sorry to cut you off mid-sentence there, but
hugely damaging moment for TERFs. Yeah.
yeah, it's like Piers Morgan has a show in the UK called Piers Morgan Uncensored, and basically it's just
That
him
was the
interviewing. Yeah, there you go. And it's
Mm.
just Piers Morgan interviewing not very nice people 9 out of 10 times. So to have the Prime Minister of Australia there, who, this is just my personal opinion, the Prime Minister of Australia is quite a wet individual. He is a very, very middle of the road, very wet, doesn't want to really say much about anything that could offend anybody. And it's a bit... That doesn't surprise me because he thinks that there's actually votes there, whereas not a single person who watched that show is ever going to vote for him because that's not his constituency.
Sure,
But,
exactly. Well, I mean, it was a pretty clear, there's only really kind of one group that you could be seeking to get on board by going on the Piers Morgan show, and it's certainly not progressive people, certainly not queer people.
It's certainly not centrists. Even centrists go,
Sure.
whoa, what are you talking about? But where next for Moria Demming?
Well, I reckon she's just going to keep leaning into this extremist kind of grift. She's just going to become another one of these figures who, in the unhinged way that they do, rants ad nauseum about this stuff and shares all of the QAnon coded memes and, all of that stuff. She's too far down the rabbit hole at this point. I think this has become her whole identity. And, for those people, I just feel so sad for them. I mean, I don't feel sorry for them, but to me, the existences of those people, the people who come for us online, the people like Moira, the people like Angie, people in all those contexts who act in the interests of this crazy conspiracy, they're just sad people, in the same way that when you see Jan 6s doing what they did. I mean, it's the same kind of conspiratorial thinking. It's just they're just sad people, who have been sent in for a bigger purpose. The purpose being to eradicate trans people. So whether all of them verbalize it that way or not, that's the cause, and they're pulled in. They're down the drain of the conspiracy. So.
It's gone old Drano, is it? But here's one of the final questions for you. Where do you think next for the trans rights movement and trans rights in general in Australia goes from this, what is an historic moment? Because it is historic to have actual Nazis at a rally on Parliament steps doing Nazi salutes in support of people who want to eradicate us. Where next for the trans rights movement and trans rights in Australia?
Yeah, well, I hope, and from what I've seen, I think I'm right that in believing that what happened on the steps of State Parliament in Melbourne was a galvanizing moment for a lot of people in realizing how horrendous this conspiracy movement is. And we definitely saw that at the subsequent Kelly J. Keane events that happened in Hobart in Australia, and then on to
Wellington.
and then on to New Zealand, where she got tomato sauced.
And she also threatened John Key. She also threatened not John Keys. He also threatened the Prime Minister of New Zealand. I can't remember his name. Said some bizarre things about the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and it's a bit. Oh, hang on a minute, you really are unhinged, madam.
I mean, because as part of the grift, as part of her being kind of the superhero far right character, she has to act like the bigger person, and so she was saying, come on, block my visa, I dare you to, so that if it did happen, then she could, pretend like, oh, I'm so cancelled, they won't even let me come into the country, blah blah blah. So it's all just so predictable and ridiculous.
But instead, New Zealand did what New Zealand does best. She went, yeah, come on, hello, how you doing? And they were like, yeah.
I thought that was wild. Like that, I thought the counter protest and the complete shutting down of just that entire thing that we saw in New Zealand was so heartening. And if we rewind for a second back to how I felt after the Posey Parker Brisbane event in my city, to then how I felt seeing not so long later the response she got in New Zealand, just a few things happened in between that, in that window of time, that have radically shifted the perception of these ideas for a lot of people. If we talk about theorists, we talk about Guy Debord, we think about the fact that our media, it's all about images, it's all about, a spectacle, and the image of the Nazi salute, the image of being associated in any way with Nazis is just unconscionable for any reasonable person. So they stood in it, and they're now having to wear that. And you see that in what's happened to Moira. You see that in what's happened to Angie. Angie facilitating the event. She can't get on any of these platforms anymore. She got an interview on one local, Bayside Radio in some remote town.
And it was a shock jock. And she was on with the shock jock. And the shock jock ate her for breakfast. When you got a shock jock on local radio, something AM radio, blah blah blah, eating you for breakfast, that you've done something really quite absurd.
They've basically been deplatformed completely. So
by awesome. Their own actions. And the amazing thing is their own actions that people have gone, no thanks, bye-bye.
Yeah, and I'm not happy that it took a Nazi rally for action to actually be taken, because I feel like, activists like us in this space have been screaming at the top of our lungs for people to get on board and be active participants in the journey towards trans liberation. But so I'm not happy that that's what it took, but that is how it has gone, and it was their choice to bring the Nazis there and to do that. And so again, they'll have to wear it. They have to wear the tomato sauce now. And sorry.
I should have bought a can of Campbell's with me or something, or just made Andy Warhol references.
Right?
I should have just made Andy Warhol references throughout the whole stream. But on a final note, call to action. What should people do if you're fired up for having watched this? What should you go out and do?
Go. Actually, no. I'm not going to say anything that could be clipped. What should people do? Well, people look. Similar thing to what we talked about last time we did a stream, which was that people need to be active participants in the journey towards liberation for trans people, and that does not just mean one vector of activism. So it doesn't just mean showing up to protests. That's one important thing that we do. We protest, we counter protest, we show up, we physically make noise. It doesn't just mean that though, it also doesn't just mean posting stuff on the internet. It also doesn't just mean putting a rainbow flag on your desk at work. It means trickier things like having hard conversations, like calling people out when they are being bigoted, like acting and organizing to remove harmful people from your workplace, from your communities, to isolate those people if they fail to, be educated out of their, bigoted, violent ways. Those things are hard, but that's what people need to do. So, yeah.
So, you heard it here first. Do stuff, but lots of stuff.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, those small steps, right? I think it's really important to frame those small steps around the fact that trans people, queer people, especially trans people, especially trans women, live in a climate of violence. And that climate of violence
are on us. Microscopes are definitely on trans people.
Yeah,
trans women especially.
We live in a climate of violence, one which is made up of microaggressions coming in different directions throughout the day, spectacle in the press, in parliamentary politics, in activist spaces, online, in legislative changes, in all of these different spaces. All of those little things, even if you think, you can just turn off the TV, just turn off Twitter, just mute your phone, turn off your phone, just don't listen to that person. All those things amount to a climate of violence. And that climate of violence is the reason that the suicide rate is the way it is. It's the reason. This is not the time for a joke. Okay. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. That climate is what drives people to want to end their lives, you know. And if you care about that, if you think that's a horrendous thing that shouldn't be happening, then we need to come at it from all those angles. So because it can't just be us, right? Because we are a minority group. They know we're a minority group. That's why they come and try to attack us, because they think we're small, they think we're powerless. We're pretty strong on our own, but having allies on side, that's awesome.
And it's one of the reasons why their big salami slicing crowbarring thing is to try to split LGBT people and trans and queer people and try to make that some false dichotomy, because they know that if they can make the groups smaller, they can more easily attack because there are more of them, and it's easier to go after a small group. Because remember this, going after trans people, going after queer people, going after intersex and non-binary people is just the first step. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual people, they're next. Don't ever forget that. This is not an isolated incident. If you are a gay TERF, you are slitting your own throat. Remember that, because if you win, you're next. So your skin is as much in this game as it is mine. And if you're happy to slit your own throat, I'm not going to stop you. But you're not slitting my throat, and you're not slitting Amy's throat, and you're not slitting anyone's throats around here, okay?
Agreed. 100%.
But yes, but thank you, Amy, for coming on and talking about the lunatic that is the Victoria Parliamentary Liberal Party.
Look, hey, you know, speaking to that and speaking to the fact that despite them getting rid of Moria, they're not some trans-positive, you know, space. Electoral politics is one of those vectors that we were talking about. Like in terms of protests are a thing, speaking out here is a thing, calling this out is a thing. Electoral politics is one of those vectors. I don't think we're going to achieve full trans liberation by voting and by shilling for political parties, but you can do some stuff there. You can do some stuff in that space. So we need it all, I think. So,
but until next time, remember, trans rights are human rights,